Welcome to November Smart Money Town Hall. Really glad to see you all here. I know it's the beginning of a holiday week, and thank you for making time, and I hope you enjoy it. Let me share my screen here, and we will get started. And so here's our agenda. Let's start with personal introductions, and I will kind of go in the order I see everyone on my screen. So you have a minute to introduce yourselves. Actually, we really don't have very many people here, so I'm not going to time anyone. Just take a minute to two to introduce yourself. Please share your name, what you do, and what industry you're in. And then after we do our economic update, we will all have a discussion about how we see these changes bearing out in our own industries. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so we can see each other talk. And Jackie, if you would like to introduce yourself first.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So hi, everybody. I am Jackie Cox, and I am the Regional Director for 4BR, which is Building Better Business by Referral. It's a networking group here in Colorado. And ultimately, I love connecting people to people. So I'm really, I love that Melissa invited me, and having the opportunity to grow yourself professionally and personally. It's just a great opportunity for that. Like I said, I have a passion for connecting people, so definitely would love to help you feel connected. And I also do some travel retreats as well. So, 2020 has shifted that just a little bit, but I do have a group going to Italy for next year. We postponed a year. It's for obvious reasons that we postponed, but we have a really great group of 14 of us going next June. So we'll still make it happen. And during that time, I do some creative coaching while we're there as well. So really diving into what you're passionate about and how travel can really inspire and motivate you to continue forward with your goals. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackie. Jalen, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jalen McKenna. I help people essentially get homes and kind of create plans that they can eventually own a home one day. I work for a small local Denver-based mortgage company called Zenith Home Loans, where we have a total of, I think, maybe a couple dozen people on staff that are all based out here in Denver. So super local, but yeah, otherwise that's about it.
Okay, awesome, Jalen. Thank you. Monica, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My business, Chameleon Digital Marketing, partners with other small businesses and entrepreneurs. And what I do for them is I create their online content, meaning their LinkedIn, their Facebook, their Instagram posts. We have strategic meetings about upcoming events, new products, services, so we co-create, co-manage. And so I basically make sure that they look good online. I also design WordPress websites, and lately that's been a trend. Everybody wants to redesign, have a new one, ask what's wrong with it, why people are not visiting the website. So that's been a very, very busy and lucrative area of online marketing. So these are the two things I do.
Awesome. Thank you, Monica. Nina, you're up next.
Hi there, Nina Anderson, and if you hear a little squealer in the background, my granddaughter's putting up a Christmas tree, so. But anyways, Nina Anderson, and thank you for having me, Melissa, and inviting me today. So I do a couple of things. About 12 years ago, I exited out of the corporate world and started a direct sales business called Wine Shop at Home, and I just celebrated about a week ago my 12th anniversary with them. So basically, yeah, it's awesome, and what I do is I help people learn about about wine, teach them about wine through in-home private tastings. We are also doing virtual tastings, cocktail winemaking classes, and all kinds of really fun things. And I also do custom labeling to help people market their business for client gifts and thank you gifts and referral gifts. But I also have a second business called Strategies to Lead that I launched 3 years ago. And I transitioned my skill set from both the corporate world and in my direct sales business to helping other people build their own business. So I help people in the world of direct sales, network marketing, but also small business owners, because we're all entrepreneurs and we all need some help from time to time to manage our putting each of the different hats on that we have to put on, and really learning how to run a business and grow a business. So that's what I help people do.
Thank you, Nina. Rachel, you're up next.
Alrighty, hello everyone. Sorry I don't have my camera on today. I'm not feeling the best, so just kind of enjoy being a little fly on the wall. But thank you, Melissa, for inviting me. I enjoy these a lot, and I learn so much every time I'm here. But I am actually transitioning into a new career path. So I'm looking into project management, and I'm taking my initial certification exam next week. So been studying like crazy for that, and it's a ton of information, but I'm excited to start, past that, start applying for jobs, whether it's in the tech industry, construction, healthcare, whatever it may be, just kind of really willing to look anywhere. So yeah, and I'm currently back home in Minnesota with my family, which has been a nice time to come home, especially around holidays, and not really have a time limit on when I'll be back in Colorado. My stuff is in a storage unit, so we'll just leave it there for now. But either way, I'm excited to be here and learn a lot today. Thank you.
Thanks, and you're in the right place, Rachel. Nina and Jackie both run different networking groups, so you're in the right place. Last but certainly not least, Robin.
That's what you say, but we all know that I am actually going last. My name is Robin McIntosh. I am the Senior Manager of Facilities at the Regional Transportation District. So I provide the public transportation. If anybody has the desire to jump on a $300,000 vehicle. So, but I mainly take care of the facilities that take care of the buses. So as everybody knows, RTD is in a very difficult situation right now, and they're downsizing. So, at the end of this year, who knows what my employment status will be. Always hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst.
Well, this is also a great place for you to be then, Robin. You can kind of get a more realistic idea of maybe different opportunities and where things are going. So as you all know, I'm your host, Melissa Timberman. I work with Five Rings Financial, and I help people create a financial path that they like and that they enjoy. I help people build a safety net and peace of mind. And I do it all without ever charging you a fee, without ever telling you what to do with your money, and without ever losing a dollar of your money ever again. In really uncertain times, that can be a really attractive option. And let us kind of delve into what we are looking at in terms of these times. So I'm going to share my screen again. And thank you all for introducing yourself. I'm thrilled to have you all here, some returning guests and some for the first time. And so what we are going to do is we're going to look at the economy by evaluating really the top 5 economic measures that people use to look at the economy. First is employment. How are we employed? There is an ideal rate of unemployment and earnings and growth and that kind of thing. The second thing we looked at is real estate. And there are 10,000 different measures of how the real estate economy and industry is doing, as both Rachel and Jalen can tell us. But one measure, just one constant measure that we use that indicates confidence in the economy and so forth, is housing starts. How many residential units are actually starting to be built? So that's what we're going to look at in terms of housing and real estate. The third thing we look at is inflation. And again, there's an ideal rate of inflation there as well. We look at spending. How much are we producing as a nation, and how much of that are we spending, and where are we spending it? Because that indicates different things about the economy. And the last thing we look at is consumer confidence. We look at a couple of different measures there. And as we go through this, you'll notice that I color code things to make it even easier to understand. So green, of course, is where the economy is doing really well. Blue is where we are just fine where we are. It's not bad, it's not good. And red, of course, is something that we want to overcome and improve as a nation. So let's jump right into that by looking at employment and looking at unemployment. So the unemployment rate is currently 6.9%. Now, that is loads better than our high in April of 14.7%, which was some of the highest unemployment we've seen since the Great Depression in 1929. But as we can see this graph on the right here, the unemployment rate, it just rises and falls over time. It's a very natural cycle. The really big spike that we've seen is the biggest we've seen in a couple of decades, but it's not unusual to have this kind of sine wave of improvement and problems as the economy rises and falls. And here what we do want to see is an unemployment rate between 3 and 4%. If unemployment is too low, then employers can't hire anyone and they can't grow and help stimulate the economy. And of course, right now, as we know, when unemployment is too high, then that impacts families and households. So we've seen a great improvement. We've kind of seen, as you can see this curve, we had a lot of improvement April through July, and now we're seeing kind of a leveling off at still a somewhat high level of unemployment. And so this gets a red score here. Next, we're going to look at how many jobs were added and lost. So from September to October, we added over 600,000 jobs, which is great. And these are all non-farm jobs. We don't really look at agricultural jobs in this because those tend to be seasonal and fluctuate a lot. So taking all agricultural jobs out, we're looking at the service sector, we're looking at finance, utilities, retail, everything that keeps the country moving. And we have added a substantial number of jobs. Now, this time last year, we're still down about 9 million, and that is where we see the higher unemployment rate. So we're doing well, and we still have more to do as a nation to catch back up. We also look at hourly earnings. Are people's wages keeping up with inflation? And in addition to hourly earnings, we also look at how many hours per week people are working. Because as we know, in the gig economy, sometimes you can be underemployed, you're not working quite 40 hours and you want to be. And sometimes, like the economic crisis we've seen here with the pandemic, we see a lot of people who are underemployed because they're in the service sector and the businesses they work for are being shut down or limited for one reason or another. So hourly earnings have kept really steady. Our weekly earnings, which is hourly earnings times the number of hours worked, weekly earnings are staying pretty steady right now too. So we would like to see some recovery from that because we do want to see wages keep up with inflation. So that's how we're doing in the employment sector. And let's look at housing starts. The number of new residential units that began construction is what we're talking about when we talk housing starts. And again, that's not things permitted. That doesn't have to do with commercial real estate. It's how are we keeping up with housing people who need homes and residences. So I actually give housing a green. I give it a green light and an A for the first time since I started doing this in August, I think it was. So we get a green score. Housing starts are finally, I added a chart from the last 10 years because we can see there are, again, regular seasonal ebbs and flows in the pace of housing starts. And after a fairly big increase at the beginning of 2020, and then of course a decrease when the economic crisis began, we're actually pretty back on pace, and I'm really pleased to see that. So for the first time ever, housing gets an A. Next, we're going to look at inflation, and by far, since I started doing this, inflation is the most solid pace that we see, the thing that we see the best result on. So the consumer price index is how much it costs us to buy a bag of groceries. The producer price index is a good indicator of future confidence in the market. When producers' prices, when it costs them more to start producing goods, a few months after that, we'll see a decrease in the economy and we'll see changes in inflation in the economy. So the consumer price index is a really good indicator of how inflation is now. And the producer price index is a really good indicator of how inflation might be a few months down the road. You generally want to see inflation between 0 and 2%. And so again, we are really holding steady at that rate, and that is great. The Federal Reserve had their monthly meeting, and they have said we are going to keep the federal funds rate at 0 to 0.25% until we see inflation and wages keeping up with that. And then they will talk about changing that. We don't want to see this funds rate stay the same for too long, because then that indicates a depression in the economy. So holding strong on inflation, it's awesome. Next, we're going to look at spending. And GDP gets evaluated over the pace of a quarter, not the pace of a month. And so finally, we are out of Q2 and that very depressing big negative number. Now, Q3, we have recovered to 33.1%, and that's keeping us on pace at not great growth in the economy, but we are coming back. And so we are very pleased to see that. And I don't think I mentioned, but if anyone has a comment or a question, I'm going too fast, please feel free to unmute yourself or put something in the chat. I would love to, we will have an interactive discussion after, but of course I want to address questions as they come up. So please feel free to interrupt. Next, let's look at how we are actually spending our money. So retail sales is what we buy at the store. Anything we buy online or in stores as consumers. And so as consumers, we're at 0.3%. We're not seeing any big increases. We're not seeing any decreases. So we're holding steady there. And again, not bad, not good. Steady is good for now. Durable goods sales is a very interesting thing to look at, because that is buying cars, buying appliances, buying things that are going to last a long time. And that's a really good indicator of consumer confidence, because if you're buying a car, it means that you're sure you're going to have a job long enough to pay for that car. When you're buying appliances, you're saying, I know that I'm going to be in this house long enough to make that worth it. So I actually like looking at durable goods, because it's an indicator of sales and spending, but also a kind of an indicator of consumer confidence. So we're seeing good improvements there. Next thing we look at is consumer confidence. And consumer confidence is also holding steady. We saw a really great increase in consumer confidence from August to September. We saw an enormous increase there. And now it's decreased a little bit, but I'm still giving it a color code blue. Because you kind of expect, when things are volatile right now, when things are different in each state, when shutdowns are being rolled out and rolled back, when we're seeing a lot of volatility, I'm absolutely not surprised that consumer confidence went down a teeny bit, but it's actually not enough to be an indicator that consumer confidence is really poor. The leading economic index is a recent measure that was enacted just a couple of years ago. And just as the economy gets more complex and we're keeping track of more numbers, the LEI is becoming a stronger indicator overall of how the economy is doing. So we do want to look at that. And that has been holding steady for the last several months. So we're doing pretty well in consumer confidence. And the next measure is something everyone is always really interested in, the stock market. A lot of people think kind of the stock market is the indicator of the economy. And as we can see, it's really a very small part. Because of investing in 401ks, a lot of Americans are actually invested in the stock market to a small extent. But keep in mind, it's not our 401ks that run the stock market. The big players in the stock market are other businesses who are investing in bonds, each other's businesses, that kind of thing. And so as American consumers, it's kind of humbling to realize that we are only a very small part of the stock market. And I like to educate people on that, so that way you're not giving it more importance. Oh my gosh, the stock market crashed today. It's not the biggest measure of the economy. It's interesting and it's easy to track. So it's not like we shouldn't pay attention to it, but I would like to keep a really good perspective on that. So again, as we can see from maybe September, October, and now we're just seeing a lot of ups and downs, and that's what we call volatility. And volatility is not a great place for the stock market to be in, because remember, every time you lose money, you have to make up more money before you're actually at a net gain there. And so we do want to avoid volatility. I don't see the market becoming any less volatile until the pandemic runs its course. But again, we do want to remember that volatility is not a good place that we want the stock market to be in. I mean, really what we want to see is just a straight up curve, right? And so now let's kind of bring it all back together and see what it all means. And here I've color coded everything with where things are. And this is one of the better places that the Smart Money Town Hall has seen in the last several months. Housing starts is green for the first time on the board. Inflation is really holding steady. GDP has finally recovered from its Q2 slump there. And consumer confidence is also pretty solid. We still have more ground to gain, and we would all love to see a little more green here. But when we wrap it all together and when we sum it all up, I'm giving the economy a really good solid B right now. And that means that you can have confidence in, maybe making your own durable goods orders. You don't need to dump everything in the stock market. It's not, nothing is crashing, nothing is going wrong. NPR has reported that 25% of households have reported an expected or have reported a decrease in income since October. And that's when expanded unemployment benefits ran out. That is when CARES Act stimulus ran out. And so yes, 25% of households are expecting to see some kind of decrease in their income, but that also means that 75% of households are not. So I give the economy a solid B. We have more work to do and more things to improve, but we are doing fine right now. So we can all take a good measure of comfort in that we're not rushing towards a big cliff here. So that ends the economic update portion of what we're doing. I hope you all found it really interesting. And now with only 7 of us here, I would love to hear from everyone. What do you think? What are you seeing in your own industries? Do you have any really big fears coming over the next months? What are your ideas on what you're seeing in your industry, in the economy, in the news? So does anyone have anything to share that the economic update sparked a thought, have a question about? If you don't want to just speak up and speak over each other, I can totally moderate the conversation here. So I'm going to stop sharing so we can have a bit better of a discussion. And if you can all scroll down on Zoom and click on participants, and that'll pop up on the right side of your screen. And then you can click that raise hand button. So what does everyone think? We're going into the holidays, the weirdest holidays any of us have ever seen. So what are we thinking about the economy and where it's going and how we're feeling about everything?
I can start.
Yeah, please, Monica.
I'm glad to see that compared to the last few months, we're at a good place, right? I think customer confidence is looking good for the holidays. I feel like people want to celebrate. They want to spoil their, people. I think retail is going to be strong because we've been holding off, especially for buying big things, right? Maybe houses were different. If somebody's been eyeing a house, right, they went for it because the interest rate is so low. I'm curious to see how January will play out, with a new president, his new, new directions and what he's going to do to, try to have small businesses, maybe try to help, unemployed people. So I think there will be some hesitation around January, February because of that. I do hope that people think, positively, and we're hopefully at the back end of the virus pandemic too. The shots are already, the medicine is already ready to go. They just need to be approved. So I hope that January will be just a little shaky, And I'd love to see some, further improvement in every area of the economy. These are my thoughts.
I think that's great, Monica. And to your point, any kind of change really gets investors nervous, and people kind of pull back and they just kind of wait to see how things are going. You're totally right about that. But on the other hand, I do think that with a Biden presidency, it's likely that we're going to see a little more stimulus. And then with the vaccine being rolled out, I think that's going to improve things as well. Even if a vaccine doesn't get distributed the way people think, or it's not quite as efficacious as people think, I still think it will have a good effect on the economy. So yes, the holidays do tend to be good for the economy, more spending, more cheerfulness, that kind of thing. And I think we will not see a decrease in that coming into the new year. So very cool. Robin, want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I finally figured out how to raise my hand. It's way down there at the bottom, but yeah, it's a little different. Anyway, so I'm in a very unique industry in that a lot of people not only are staying at home and working from home, they're not using public transportation, but even when the economy recovers, we're predicting that a lot of people have kind of learned by this social experiment that they can work from home, and it will not be one or the other. I don't believe in the future it's going to be a hybrid of both. And I think a lot of downtown high rises are also predicting that they're going to be struggling because a lot of people are not coming back downtown on a permanent basis. So for my industry, we are really ratcheting down, and I'm talking ratcheting like 40%. Now, if another stimulus comes around, they might try to save some of our jobs. I don't know. There's been some talk about waiting until after the new year. They're not going to pull any triggers until January 1st, but they are going to start with a wave come December. There's going to be some letters sent out and some people notified. So regardless of if the economy comes back or not, I think my industry is going to be impacted much longer than the recovery.
I actually have a couple of thoughts or a couple of questions for you about that, Robin. So from what I understand, big infrastructure and transportation projects tend to be planned over like 8 to 10 years before they're executed. So has the pandemic really scotched anything that's been in the works, like the fast track program?
Well, the fast tracks program was everything that was buildable has already been built. The long range projects that still had to be financed and still had to be funded have not been, well, they were never on the radar. I mean, they were like pushed out to 2040 already.
Got it.
So anything that was a medium-sized project has been scrapped. The only project this year that got through was one of my facilities has a very leaky roof, very old roof. And so we are proceeding with that. That's my plat facility. Now, the interesting thing about that is, recently Denver passed a green roof initiative, which we were all very nervous about. We didn't know how that was going to economically impact our project. And it turns out if you just throw them some money, they're okay with it, right? You don't necessarily have to put, grass on your roof, although they would like you to. You also don't have to put solar on your roof, and neither of those would pencil out when we did the analysis. It was actually cheaper for us to pay the, I don't know if you want to call it penalty, fee, incentive, whatever that you want to call it. We just forked that over and are proceeding with the job. But it actually came in under budget, which was very surprising because in the recent history, all of our jobs have been over budget because, as you know, before this happened, the economy was just raging, and contractors were able to name their price. So this has been kind of a real gut check for us all.
Interesting. And if anyone else has any other thoughts, I would love to hear from everyone this morning. But I did have one more question from you, Robin. You kind of touched on the point that a lot more people are working from home, and companies are realizing that, yes, people do get work done from home. And in fact, most companies are realizing that people work more from home because there's no commute, no reason to stop. And so I think what we're going to see is changes in, I think we're already seeing some changes in real estate, people moving away from city centers, people buying larger homes so that they can have home offices and not work out of their bedrooms or have, you know, the kids running around in the background. Not that anyone's going to not want to see people's cute cats and dogs and 2-year-olds and that kind of thing. But on that note, as people move away from the city centers, do you think that RTD and public transportation is going to recover as we do like more long range, like from Fort Collins to downtown Denver or rural areas into cities? Do you think that's going to expand in the next couple of decades? Or do you think long term you don't see it happening that way?
You know, that's an interesting question, and that's way outside my wheelhouse. We have a very defined district, and it goes from Jefferson County to bits of Douglas and as far north as Adams County, and as far south as Jefferson and Douglas as well. Those type of busing and transportation are currently falling within CDOT's realm. There used to be a Frex bus, they used to call it, Front Range Express Bus, and CDOT bought that, and they're now running the Mustang, which goes from Fort Collins down to Colorado Springs and all the way out to Glenwood Springs on the western slope. So that would be more of a question for them if they're going to try to do that. And I really think it's a great idea. What I was hoping for, rather than, you know, I don't want to shoot my own company in the foot, but rather than you know, the type of commuter rail we had, it would be nice to have like a bullet train that went from, you know, Fort Collins all the way down to Pueblo, for instance.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you could, because we have people, my wife works at the Global Village Academy, and we have teachers that are commuting from Fort Collins to North Glen and Thornton area, you know, and just think about that. That's an hour one way. That's 2 hours of your life every day. So I think that's where the opportunity really was missed, and it could happen in the future. But again, that's CDOT. That's outside of our realm.
Cool. Thanks. Jalen, what are you seeing in your industry? Are mortgage rates still going lower? Or are they staying? I mean, they can't really go through the floor. So what are you seeing in the mortgage industry?
Yeah. So as far as rates are concerned, they should be staying the same for the next few years, at least through next year, with what the rates that we're seeing now. And that's just because essentially when the economy is recovering from something, the Fed just wants you to essentially to borrow as much money as you possibly can to re-stimulate the economy. And so buying all those houses that they're building is definitely a great stimulation. And like you were saying, a lot of people are moving out of Denver. I think the Denver market for condos is actually a buyer's market because so many people are moving out of the big city. They know now that if you get stuck into your house for the next year, that you probably do want that office. So a 2-bedroom condo is no longer viable for most people. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we're at as far as that's concerned. They could always go lower. Who knows? And in fact, that's what some experts are even saying, is that they could go lower. For the wholesale market, you're looking at like 2% for a 30-year right now. So do most consumers have access to a 2%? Not unless you buy down the rate. But just knowing that that's actually a possibility on the horizon isn't too crazy. Like 2.5% right now is actually, for a 30-year fixed, isn't that unheard of at this point. So it's definitely surprising. And it kind of helps offset the huge amount of essentially the seller's market that we have. You can essentially get more house for your buck with those lower interest rates at the moment. So it's kind of it's good and bad. The booming housing market, that we have this all-time low supply, and so builders are trying to build as much as humanly possible, whether way up north or way out east, is definitely interesting. But these lower interest rates are somehow allowing people to still have that same buying power that they had a few years ago, even though they're buying a house that has, you know, a few $100,000 more for essentially the same house that you could get. So, yeah.
Awesome. That's good news. And My husband and I bought our home last September, so just over a year ago, and rates dropped from then. We refinanced in May, and I'm kind of like, but I want 2.5%. So it's yeah, very interesting to look at. Jackie and Nina.
Well, I'm a layman here. And so I have to ask the question, it's the elephant in the room. How are the banks making any money at 2% interest or less? I mean, I don't know how they're surviving.
The super interesting thing about how that works is that if you work for RTD and you make $50,000 a year, you take that $50,000 and you put it in your budget, and you pay your taxes and you pay your housing expenses and you pay all of your other discretionary expenses, you know, food, internet, that kind of thing. Banks don't do that. When you borrow money from a bank, they take your loan payments and they don't use that money to pay their bills. They take that money and they invest it. And then they take that profit and they pay their bills. Isn't that interesting? They think about money in a completely different way than we do because they're just dealing with such vast amounts of money.
But I'll also kind of throw the elephant in the room too, because the last corporate industry that I did work for was home building. And part of the problem was over inventory and sitting on millions of dollars of inventory, which collapsed the industry. So that is one of the areas that kind of scares me with all the building is like, are they overbuilding too much to take advantage of the situation that's going on in the market and creating a bigger problem later on down the road? So that is kind of where my concern comes in with something like that.
Yeah, Nina, you're totally right, and I think that's one interesting thing about the real estate industry is because there are so many different measures. You know, are people buying homes over asking price? You know, housing permits versus housing starts are two different numbers, and over inventory did create the 2008 crisis, and regulating the banking industry. You know, over regulation, I'm not sure it solved any problem in the world from parenting to banking. So yeah, that's a really good point, Nina. And I don't think it's anything I have an answer to, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So.
it's definitely a thin line. Colorado is kind of in an interesting position as far as real estate is concerned, just because of the large amount of people we have. And the amount of people that are coming in. So we're expected another 3 million people to be joining Colorado by 2050. So essentially 100,000 people per year over the next 30 years is supposed to be coming into Colorado. So it's definitely a thin line that those home builders, and I know I have a few connections in Richmond that I know while they're building these homes during these booms, they're just slowly increasing prices because they know they can get away with it. But it sounds like to them that they're just keeping with the same pace that they're originally going. They're just taking these boom times and going, well, I mean, if we can get away with a $350,000 house right now, whereas it was $300,000 6 months ago, then we're just going to do that since that supply and demand for what we currently have built is available.
And they might be using that extra increase to offset any losses they're anticipating too. Super interesting. Jackie and Nina, you both have a really unique position where you both interact with a lot of other small business owners. So you kind of see a wide swath of the things that are going on. And so what are you guys seeing in your respective areas?
Well, I'm seeing it's a combination. I would say probably 70 to 80%. I see people are doing very well, you know, with their small businesses. I think everybody has kind of successfully made, I hate to use this word because it seems like it's an overused word these days, but they've been pivoting and they've been learning new skill sets on how to continue their businesses, which I think in the long run has become a positive, just like what Monica was saying, is that it seems to be the trend of people wanting to revamp their websites. So they're taking their current tools and making them better and getting them out there. And I also see that people who have lost their jobs are jumping into it. It's kind of like when I lost my job, 12 years ago, from home building. It forced me to look at something different and do something different. So I see that happening as well. But then I also see a small percentage, like 20-25% of the people, they're struggling because of the type of business they have. They're trying to figure out how to like if you're, let's say for as a personal chef, for example, that is kind of an area where they're really kind of like a very fine line of doing food delivery and things like that. So it's all over the board, but I think for the most part, people are hanging in there. Positivity, and I think I think Jackie could probably say this too, is that, part of the thing of our networks that we have, our groups, is a community. It's a safe place. It's a support system to help people. And I think we are trying to kind of bring it back to that cellular level of really supporting that community versus, I think I'd rather go and help somebody in my community versus a big box store at this point, because of small business. So I see a little bit of that.
On a personal note, when you mentioned home chefs, my husband and I have had a personal chef come in, and she makes meals and frees them for us. And we are doing it because we are absolutely sick of eating our own cooking. Absolutely sick of having to think about food. Children, those little buggers want to eat like every night. So so we are using a personal chef for that. Jackie.
Yeah, and I would agree with what Nina has to say too. I mean, I think across the board, people have made a lot of shifts. And, I was recently talking to several bakeries because we were working on a project. And, a lot of the bakeries I talked to, they were they're home bakeries, or many of them were. And they said, you know what, this has always been a passion of mine, but I really started the business because of COVID this year, because of shifting and making new decisions. And ultimately, that's a positive then, because people are really diving into what they're passionate about then. And I think to what Nina was saying too, I mean, people are more and more supportive of small businesses because we can see the effects of that. Small business will forever be the heart of America, the heart of our country. And anyone who denies that isn't seeing it then. And that's okay. But ultimately, small businesses are where people want to show that support. Because you see over and over on social media that, someone did a little jig because they got a sale today. Well, are big box companies doing that? No, they're not, probably. Now, within the industry that I've seen as well, I mean, the biggest changes that we need to adjust to is, we are people and we want to interact with humans and be face to face and be shoulder to shoulder. And this has shifted. Obviously, we're sitting here on Zoom, so that has shifted as well. And yes, it's great. It's a great technology for the time being. Having said that, we as humans are going to want to get back to in person. And I think that in a networking opportunity, you see that. We've seen that a lot. That a good majority of our groups, when we were able to, were definitely ready to be in person. I mean, we had only a small few that wanted to stay on Zoom, and mostly, it was concern at first, but then it started shifting to convenience. And so we as a group and as any organization like this, we need to make those shifts as well, because some people like the Zoom factor for convenience. Some people, like myself, as a high extrovert, I'm getting burnt out on it, and I need to be able to see people. And so, through the summer months when it was safe to be in person and things like that, that's where I thrive. And that's where organizations like ours do thrive. And I think any company, as much as they're shifting to, it's easy to be able to work from home, and these commercial real estate organizations and buildings have to be aware of that as well. Having said that, humans are still humans, and they need that interaction. And so, but what's that shift look like? I mean, is it hybrid versions? Is it opportunities for, people to make these connections like this online, which is fantastic, but then there's gotta be an outlet where we can still meet in person as well. So, that nice hybrid option, I think, is where we're all kind of leaning in on. And, you just have to kind of go with it. And yes, Nina, I'm sick of the word pivot too, but you do have to kind of make those decisions based on, okay, what's the betterment of the entire group or organization or business or whatever you're working in. You really have to make that decision for them. So, you know, as we ebb and flow, you know, one of the biggest things that we will continue to see is venue, right? I mean, we as organizations, we as a networking group, we meet in venues. Okay, so some of them are closing their doors, unfortunately, and I hope that they make it through this last, you know, this next round of shutdowns or whatever. But we as humans, we still need to be able to find a way to support them, right? And because again, back to my original statement, small business will forever be the heart of our country. It has to be. It has to be. Because those, you know, those bigger companies, they need to recognize too that people are people and people want to be around people and support where we can.
Yeah, awesome. Great points. And you are exactly right. Even when I owned a brick and mortar a few years ago, I always read the Colorado Economic Report. And in Colorado, 90% of people are employed by small businesses. I would have thought it would be 60, 70%. No, it's much higher than that. So yeah, quite a few people own small businesses. A lot of people are saying, I need multiple streams of income. So they have a main job and a side gig. I think that's where we're going to see the gig economy pivot to. more part-time jobs and side hustles instead of you know, the big Ubers and Lyfts and that kind of thing. So the last portion, thank you so much. This discussion was great today. It's so nice to really be able to give everyone their time to speak. So I kind of like the you know, 10, 15 person groups, and I kind of like the smaller groups too. So the thing we're going to end up with is our Smart Money Minute. And most of us are friends on Facebook and LinkedIn, and I post just 5 Rings, the company I work for. We have always built ourselves on a foundation of financial education. We firmly believe that people make intelligent decisions with their money when they have the right information. And so in that spirit, the last 10 minutes of our town hall, I always go into a little bit of that financial education. So today we're going to talk about risk versus safety. I think that's a very salient discussion point for where the economy is right now. And so the first question is, when people think of investing, what do they think of? The first thing almost everyone thinks of is the stock market. But there are actually a lot of different types of investments. The stock market is only one, and the biggest variable between investment types is the amount of risk or safety they each have. So I'm going to go to my trusty board here. You all know I like to draw, and you also all know that stick figures are about the best you're going to get from me. But we're going to talk about risk versus safety today. And so when we talk about the risk versus safety teeter-totter, we're talking about different types of investments. So over on the risky side here, we've got things like commodities. That's gold and silver. The stock market, that's really the one a lot of people think of first. That's their go-to for what to invest in. Real estate, as Nina can tell us, 2008 was really the first time that real estate became a risky investment where we could see the prices of our real estate decline as well as improve. And then on the safety side, you know, this is your checking and savings account. You always know how much money is going to be on that account, and it's very reliable. Other safe investments are bonds, CDs, money market accounts, keeping money stuffed under your mattress. When someone pays you cash or something like that, do you go deposit it in the bank, or do you just kind of leave it at home somewhere? Some people have the sock drawer or the cookie jar stuffed with cash. So those are all safe investments. And then we have our risky investments. And an important thing to know is our tolerance. All of us land somewhere on here on this teeter-totter. In general, women prefer safer investments than men do. But there's different tolerances for this, and this is why. So the reason we like risky investments is that we can grow a lot with those. Great way to grow. Unfortunately, we can also lose a lot with them. And we all know what that looks like in the stock market. Now, the safe side is great because we will never lose our money in those. That's why they're safe. There's no risk there, but there's also very, very, very little reward. And so all of us land on this teeter-totter at some point along this risk versus safety. And an important thing to know is that where we are on that teeter-totter changes over time. It can change with our life circumstances. It can change as we age. The older you get, the less potential, the less years you have to recoup losses. So the older we get, we generally move towards even more towards the safe side of this teeter-totter. And there's also been a cultural shift over the last couple of decades. And cultural shifts usually happen they're larger shifts that reflect the economy as a whole. And they're usually due to changes in the economy. So let's explore that. We're going to get a really tiny history lesson here. Okay. So this is what the stock market looked like in the 80s and 90s. It kind of just went straight up, right? Those were the good years, the golden years. And then we hit Y2K, and we didn't have the enormous crash from Y2K that we thought, but 2000 and 2001, we lost. It was our first opportunity to lose up to 42% of anything we had saved. 42%, it's a lot. And the next couple of years were the best. Oh, they were so good. And in 2007, we were back. Investors were dancing in the streets. People were really excited. Oh my gosh, we're back. The stock market's recovered. Let me ask you a question. If you were to give me if I were to come to you and I were to say, all right, Robin, Jalen, Jackie, Monica, Nina, give me your money. I'm going to invest it for you. And 7 years from now, I'm going to give you the same amount of money you gave me. Does that sound like a good investment to you? No, it sounds terrible. It really does. So, but investors were dancing in the streets because we were finally back. And things continued to improve through 2008. And then we all know what happened in 2008. An even sharper decline. And that was our second opportunity to lose. This time we lost up to 54% of what we had saved. And again, we recovered. We had mostly up years. We had kind of a flat year. And in 2013, more dancing in the street. Yes, we're back. We're back. Keep in mind, we're back means I'm going to give you the same amount of money you gave me 5 years ago. Okay. 2014 was a good year. 2013 itself was not a great year. 14 was okay. We had a tiny loss in 15. We kept improving. 18 was down. We finally got to 2020. We got to a peak. And then we all know what happened there. We had a loss, and now it's just kind of been like this ever since. Okay? And so that's the risky side of things, where they tell you these losses are inevitable. You just have to take your lumps. You just have to do that in order to win. What if I told you that that wasn't necessarily true, right? The question is, where do you and most people fit on the risk versus safety teeter-totter? You know, what we really want is we want to be right here in the middle, right? We want all the advantages and none of the disadvantages. We want to grow our money, but not have any risk. We want to not lose our money. And most of us are taught over the years, we talk to friends, we read ourselves, we educate ourselves over time, and most of us are taught that this is the only thing that's available to us. We can grow, but we just have to lose sometimes in order to do that. And I tell you, my friends, au contraire, you do not need to lose in order to gain. So at Five Rings Financial, we use financial instruments called indexed accounts. And what an indexed account looks like is this. You grow with the market. So we're starting out here in the same spot. But when the market goes down, you don't lose anything. You don't gain anything either. So I would come to you and I would say, you have the same amount of money you did last year. And you're like, well, Melissa, that kind of sucks. And I'd be like, yeah, but your neighbor, he's down 42%. Zero sounds kind of good in that condition, right? Zero is not bad. But you can also grow with the market. And so these years that were so good, you grow and you grow and you grow and you grow. And then when your friends are over here losing 54%, you know, some people put off retirement because of that. Some people were unable to retire because they lost so much in their retirement accounts. And in those conditions, you don't lose. You don't gain anything, so it's not very exciting. But when we're thinking about the fable of the tortoise and the hare, we're the tortoises here. We never lose ground. We're always moving forward. We're always moving up or sideways, up or sideways. And then, of course, this is too good to be true, right? It's just too good to be true. There's not possible. It is possible. And the reason for that is because whenever you have a floor, here your floor is 0. Whenever you have a floor, you always have a ceiling above you. And that ceiling is sometimes you can't take advantage of all of the growth of these really good years. 2002 was one of the best years we had in decades. People grew 26% that year. You're not going to grow 26% ever, but you can grow 10 or 12%. And so everyone we work with always says, yes, I would gladly give up some of the upside in order to never have to recover from losses. And keep in mind, this year was another good year. Right after the 08 crash, 2009, markets went up 23%. You're never going to make 23%, but you're never going to lose again. So when someone tells you that these losses are inevitable, you now know that that is not the truth. We have filled up our hour. Thank you so much for being here. Does anyone have any final questions, final thoughts, anything to add? Thank you so much for everyone being here. I would love to see you again next month. Come to meet new people, learn a little bit about the economy, maybe feel a little bit better about how things are going, and would love to see you all again.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Melissa. See you guys.
Good to see you. Thank you. Thanks, Robin. See you later.
I should say thank you.
Yeah, I'll see you soon.
All right, I'll be there.
Take care. Bye.